Hey, what is up, y'all? It's Zanya,
It's Genevieve.
And Teresa.
bringing you fresh and zesty content for your education and enjoyment.
In this episode, we're going to talk about the essay, The Ugly Truth About Beauty, written by Dave Barry, and then we're going to dive into some more general topics and then close off with a couple of responses from our peers and their perspective. So, Sonia, would you mind summarizing the essay?
Yup, the essay we are reading today is The Ugly Truth About Beauty by Dave Barry. It was written in about 1990-ish. Teresa knows the exact year, but we'll touch more on that later when we're discussing context. So, the essay starts off, if you're a man, at some point, a woman will ask you how she looks. How do I look? She'll ask. You must be careful how you answer this question. The best technique is to form an honest yet sensitive opinion, and then collapse on the floor with some kind of fatal seizure. Trust me, this is the easiest way out because you will never come up with the right answer. So already off to a great start. He goes into how women generally don't think of their looks the same way that men do, because men usually form an opinion of how they look in their teen years, and then they kind of just stick with that for the rest of their lives. But women, they don't think of themselves that way. They feel they always have to improve something or more than one something. So this lowers her self-esteem. And then he goes into why a woman's self-esteem would be so low. He talks about the Barbie complexes and how girls grow up playing with a doll proportioned such that if it were human, it would be 7 feet tall and weigh 81 pounds, which 53 of those pounds would be the chest area. And of course, that's an impossible appearance standard to live up to. And then he goes into guys' dolls, action figures, and how he has a son who played with a Buzz-Off action figure. It's a character from He-Man, who was part human, part flying insect. So Buzz-Off was very much unlike a Barbie doll, but he was extremely self-confident. You couldn't imagine Buzz-Off saying to the other action figures, "Do you think these wings make my hips look big?" But women grow up thinking how they need to look like Barbie because of the beauty industry, the multi-billion-dollar beauty industry, who is devoted to convincing women that they must try. And then he talks about a episode on Oprah where Cindy Crawford, who's an American model and actress, was talking about makeup tips and giving recommendations to the audience. So Cindy had all these middle-aged women apply beauty products to their faces, and she stressed how important it was to apply them in a certain way, using the tips of their fingers. Of course, all the women dutifully did this, even though it was obvious to every sane observer that it didn't matter how carefully you applied the products, you would still not look like Cindy Crawford. The author makes it clear that he's not saying that men are superior, but he's saying that you're not going to get a group of middle-aged men to sit in a room and apply cosmetics to themselves under the instruction of Brad Pitt in hopes of looking more like him, because men would realize that this task was pointless and demeaning. He then goes into how why would women think that men would want them to look like Cindy Crawford? And he has two responses, which I'm going to quote. One, hey, just because we're idiots doesn't mean you have to be. And two, men don't even notice 97% of the beauty efforts you make anyway. Take fingernails. The average woman spends 5,000 hours per year worrying about her fingernails. I have never once, in more than 40 years of listening to men talk about women, hear a man say, "She has a nice set of fingernails." So he concludes his essay by saying that if you're a man and a woman asks you how she looks, you're in big trouble. You can't say she looks bad, but you can't say that she looks great because she'll think you're lying because she has spent countless hours with the help of the multi-billion-dollar beauty industry obsessing about the differences between herself and Cindy Crawford. Also, she suspects that you're not qualified to judge anybody's appearance.
Wow, okay, again, a lot to unpack. First off, I think it's important to point out that this was written back in 1998. Now, the concept of beauty is kind of like, it's universal and it's also very subjective. You know, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, yada yada. I think while beauty standards are as dynamic as ever, you know, the connotations of being beautiful has changed into the more self-love and self-care and what makes you happy, and it's more doing it for yourself nowadays, I feel, instead of doing it to impress someone else. That isn't to say that, there aren't external factors, driving you to change or alter your appearance. Those are definite reasons.
Yeah, I think it's still crazy to think about, though, that even though this was written in 98, that it's still, you wouldn't assume that when you first heard it. You might think some things were a little out of date, but not by that much of a difference, not by, 22 years. So to think that most of this is still relevant today, or similarly relevant today, is still crazy.
I think right now, when you're talking about beauty and the beauty industry and the whole argument about who's pushing what agenda, I really think it's just the industry itself and the people that are profiting off of the idea of there's this certain standard of beauty. It's not really upheld by guys or gals. It's really about the beauty industry, because at the end of the day, it's not some 6-foot tall guy with abs and great hair that's, enforcing impossible standards for a girl. I mean, I'm sure there might be some instances out there, but the more prevalent case is it's some snobby lady in the middle of a Manhattan apartment, pointing the models and photoshopping them so that we look to those magazines and think, wow, I should look like this. It's not really the guys or us pushing it, And when we talk about this, I think it's important to consider where we're coming from in terms to better understand the other point of view. It's not really an us versus you situation. It's a us versus them. And by them, it's the beauty industry.
Yeah, and I definitely think that even nowadays, when people are kind of trying to dismantle this idea of an ideal person and what that beauty would look like, that even still, I know Instagram is a large contender, people say, in changing what the ideal is people will put up photos that some people don't think is how they actually look most of the time, or that kind of thing. So I know it still exists today, even though they're just trying to make sure that it is something that slowly falls out of fashion.
Yeah, I think it's a mold that's created by various industries, but I guess some part of us as a population, indirectly, we kind of enforce that mold, it's important to note that we are a visual species, and appearances do matter to an extent, but I think it's the emphasis on the importance of appearances may pose a problem to people's mental and physical health.
Speaking of health in general, can we talk about the standards for guys in the movies and TV shows and stuff? I was hearing, I think it was back in right before quarantine when the Marvel movies were still kind of coming out pretty often. There was this one, I think it was Chris Hemsworth, where he ended up almost having to go to the hospital because he got dehydrated and was basically starving himself, because the thing about muscle definition is you have to be really dehydrated. So if a guy is on screen and they want to show, oh yeah, he has a 6-pack abs, has the perfect body, he's dehydrating himself just for that definition. I don't know if it's Chris Hemsworth though, so don't quote me on that, but I definitely know it was a Marvel actor.
And this stuff is problematic. We talk about beauty standards, but it's important to consider both sides, because while eating disorders are a huge recognized problem in a lot of girls, we kind of don't really talk about the guys in the industry who are literally starving themselves and dehydrating themselves for ab definition, which we have this idea in our head. It's normal. We see the guy with 6-pack abs on TV, I don't know, like Chris Pratt or whatever. But we get the idea that, hey, it's normal, but the dudes probably have to lose 60 pounds in 6 months for whatever movie he's in, and we don't see that. But in our heads, it's normalized, again, because of the industry.
Yeah, I definitely think, and for superhero movies, it's I guess a little bit more understandable that they should be super strong or whatever. But even with the editing skills we have today, I feel like that could help. But even still, the fact that they're idolizing that is kind of a problem. I think any sort of idolized body type that isn't healthily achievable should not be put in the media. I think your health and that concern for your health is something that should be put above whatever is being posted out there.
So now that we've talked about some of the standards on guys, do we want to move on to those standards in women? Especially where we have, like Jenna, you mentioned Instagram, the supermodels, the whole... Again, I don't think it's the models themselves. They're not to blame. It's really them conforming to an industry that, decides all of this. And, they are just a vessel for the industry's, I guess, message. Like, girls would starve themselves or make themselves bulimic and get eating disorders, again mentioned before, to achieve, like, a flat stomach. Well, biologically, it's actually impossible because, we have uteruses and other vital organs, and that's simply not possible to have, like, a concave stomach.
I was kind of researching this a little bit about girls trying to achieve a flat stomach. So both men and women have their vital organs, such as the stomach, liver, and intestine, in their stomach. Makes sense. The thing about girls, though, is that they also have more organs in their stomach for reproduction and stuff, like their uterus, fallopian tubes, and ovaries. That is all in the lower part of the stomach. So concave lower bellies don't exist for girls. Like, the only time they do is when they are photoshopped, or if, like, you have a surgery to remove those organs in the first place. So girls trying, like, when you look at a magazine and you see a woman who looks gorgeous and like concave belly, that concave belly is most likely photoshopped.
It definitely harms future, like, girls and stuff, and sort of saying that this is how you should look, and the fact that you don't look like this is a problem, when it in fact isn't, and isn't real in the first place. So the fact that it's put out there, essentially, for others to compare themselves to, because, don't get me wrong, everybody is comparing themselves to everybody else they meet in some little way or the other. So when you see this perfect body, you think that that's what you should look like, and the fact that you don't, that's a problem, when it isn't.
Yeah, personally, I think if you want to achieve a certain look, that's fine. But if you truly want to feel happy working towards your personal idea of beauty without harming you or anyone else around you by also, like, applying that same sort of standard, that's not okay. But if you truly want to do this out of your own free will and own volition, then go ahead. Just don't push yourself to mental or physical harm, because that's not worth, I guess, the pain or the suffering to go through.
Yeah, and I guess that can kind of lead into the disconnect between men and women, and how women are kind of like the Mr. Dave Barry was saying in his article, just the fact that women are kind of, they have that mindset that they're not good enough, no matter what they look like.
Yeah, taking the guy's words, I would assume that the guy really doesn't care what you look like. I'm hoping that it's the disconnect between the groups where, women they have this idea that, oh, you're just saying that, to make me feel better. And the guy's like, no, seriously, I literally do not care. He is like, I literally do not care about the fingernail thing he brings up, which I think is a fair point. However, I do think the fingernails, I think that's a more personal, like, feel-good thing, but maybe that's just me. I don't know. It's the disconnect. I think guys should, when they're having this sort of conversation where it's like the girl is feeling self-conscious about something and the guy's like, dude, it's literally not a big deal. I think the guy should kind of understand where the girl's coming from. Her, like, a majority of her life, she doesn't feel a certain way. So I think the guy, not the whole responsibility to make the girl feel better. It's just, hey, trust me, I like you the way you are. That's cool. And the girl has to, I guess, I don't know, forcing self-acceptance isn't anything I want to push on anyone. But for the girl, again, try to understand where the guy is coming from.
Yeah, I guess something that I'm kind of thinking about now in terms of it being outdated. Maybe it's just me, but I don't think it really happens anymore where women are kind of asking a guy for their opinion on how they look. Maybe because they either just don't need that validation or think they either realize that it puts the guy in a situation that they don't know how to answer and they aren't going to be satisfied with what answer they get anyway. But maybe that's just me. Not entirely sure. So another thing that we could look at here is the difference between not only that, but also how that relates to today, and just the fact that we did a sort of poll on different guys we asked on our Snapchat that we know, and just kind of said, what's the first thing you notice about a girl's appearance, and how much do appearances factor in your interest in a girl? And we can just go over some of the responses we got, I think.
And, you know, for the statistics teacher that may or may not be listening in, we did consider response bias. I polled guys, or not guys, I polled girls, Sonia polled guys, and then I sort of went down my Snapchat list and hunted people down for a more general response. So yes, we realize response bias is, you know, definitely an issue that we considered, but we're not drawing any definite conclusion. We're just summarizing their response and, you know, generally talking about it. So
yeah, and this definitely was obviously voluntary, but taking in the responses that we got, I think is fair. But I know some people that might think differently might not have responded, and that's okay. I think this is definitely good to get some responses that are most likely genuine, given that it was a voluntary survey.
I think we should go with a more general just summary. So Sonia's poll with the guys, general common factor is, you know, eyes, the hair, the face. Some mentioned teeth and the smile. The general response to how much does appearance factor? Well, they're you know, again, they kind of line up with what Dave Barry's argument. Appearances may factor in the beginning more because, you know, you're just getting to know the person, but that consideration just sort of goes down as you get to know her. So, Sonia, do you want to mention some notable responses?
I think I want to talk about the one that said teeth, just because it was the one that made me laugh. So one guy said that for the first question, what's the first thing you notice about a girl's appearance? It was hair and teeth. And then for how much the appearance is factored in the interest, he said maybe 50-50. We love pretty girls, but we don't like shallow girls. We want a girl who's pretty, but not conceited or stupid. Yeah, that one made me laugh.
At least the guy was honest. I mean, you know, it's
forthcoming.
Facts,
yeah.
I definitely think, though, just from all of the responses from the guys, that they definitely said that most of them said that personality has more to do with it. The more, like, the longer you're in a relationship, or the longer you want to spend time with that person, kind of thing. So it's nice to hear.
Yeah, kind of reassuring that, you know. Yeah. Common interests, personality. So yeah. Do you guys want to move on to girls?
Yeah, we can move on to girls.
Cool. Okay, so there were 4 responders, so comparably less to the guys. I think the guys had about 9 or 10-ish. So again, mostly hair, or not hair, the eyes, the face. Again, personality factors in. I think overall, from the 4 girls that we polled, attraction, appearances do matter. The most notable response that I really love was from a girl that said, the way they're dressed, especially their shoes. You can tell a lot about a person based on their shoes, which I think is that's a unique response. I've never heard that one before.
See, but knowing this, I definitely agree with that. It's definitely something that if you look at somebody's shoes, you can kind of tell a lot about somebody. I met this one girl one time that had 2 different colored Converse, and they were kind of beaten up. But she was such a genuine person, though, because one of those shoes was from one of her internet best friends from Mexico, and they each had the other shoe, and I thought it was super cool.
Yeah, that's really cool. That's super nice. What are your guys' thoughts? What do you guys think about the questions.
Wait, are you asking us like what our answers would be to the questions, or like what we think about the questions?
Yes, I am asking you, what is your response to the questions? Because I wrote these I wrote these questions. I know how we all feel about them.
Okay, so my answer, I guess, for like what's the first thing I notice about appearance would be like, of course, the eyes and the smile, because I smile a lot, so I want to see if the other person smiles a lot, because then I know that we vibe. So yeah, that's just me. And although I do agree with most of the guys' responses that appearances don't really factor in after I've gotten to know the person. So like when I'm meeting them for the first time, yes, appearances matter a lot. But say like we're hanging out, watching a movie or something, they don't matter. I just need to know if they can keep up with a conversation and if they're funny.
Yeah, I definitely think my response is a little weird, but I just it's the first thing that comes up for me is just whenever I see anybody, the first thing I kind of notice is their hair, mainly because I think hair is one of those things that you can kind of. Now, granted, there's always factors of it that you can't control, like how curly it is, that kind of thing. But I think it's one of those things that you can control, and how you decide to style it or how long you decide to cut it is definitely something that can show a lot of somebody's personality. So that is kind of the first thing I notice. Does it matter? Most of the time, no. Like, I don't think appearances really are a big deal at all. I think what is behind that appearance is truly what's important.
Yeah, honestly, same thing. Face, eyes, general things. I don't know. I don't personally. I don't really have a preference as long as you can keep up a decent conversation with me and you can keep up with my work ethic or just my work habits. If we're working on a project together, that's really that's really all I care about. So for the general people that I hunted down and pulled, again, mostly it was pretty much the same thing. The eyes, the face, some mentioned height and hair. Some people said they had a moderate, impact, but as they got to know the person better, that sort of just decreases. Someone said their stature and how they carry themselves, which, that's kind of neat. I've never, it's important to also consider how you present yourself, dealing with the hand that you have, if, I guess, objectively, if you believe that you're not the best looking person in the room, at least you can sort of impact that, with confidence. So that's cool.
Yeah, so I think that was nice. Just it was glad to see so many people that answered. So thank you to everybody that slid up and gave us a response because it was definitely helpful to kind of see.
And on that note, thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe for more content and give us a like. Comment down below with your thoughts. What's the first thing you notice about someone's appearance? And how much effort do you put into yours?
Also, be sure to let us know what other new ideas or topics that you want to see on the show. Thank you for hanging out with us and be on the lookout for our next episode later this week.